Welcome again. So in this lesson, let us learn about test analysis and design. This is the third most important activity of the fundamental test process. So who performs this test analysis and design activity? You, the test engineer or the test analyst, will be performing this very critical activity. And the quality with which you do the test analysis and design will determine the quality of testing that you will do henceforth. So that is why, and again, the test engineers, the test analysts must have the right skills to perform this activity. A lot of skills you will learn in the future topics. But let us try to understand what happens during this activity called test analysis and design activity. So first and foremost, you have to understand what is being tested. So the software may have a lot of documentation associated with that. So the information that is important for doing this testing or understanding about the software that you are going to test, we call that as test basis. So you have to spend significant effort on understanding the test basis. So the first step is reviewing the test basis, meaning collect all the information related to the software and study them very carefully, talk to the people if you don't understand, ask the stakeholders the right questions, but develop good understanding about the software that you are going to test. Once having done that, while you are looking at the information that is useful for you to develop tests, second important thing you have to do is that you have to evaluate the testability of the requirements. What do you mean by testability? Testability is ease with which you can develop tests using the information that you have. If the information doesn't provide you good thinking on how to develop test cases, then that information is less testable. So if the information or the test basis is not very testable, what you should do? You have to go back to the stakeholders and ask for more relevant information. So that is your second step that you have to think at the time of test analysis and design. That is evaluating the testability of requirements. Testability is ease with which we can create test cases based on these requirements. We'll talk about testability later, but keep that in mind. And after having done that, the third important step is to identify test conditions from your test basis. In the earlier lesson, we talked about test conditions. How do we identify test conditions? So how do we identify test conditions? You look at the test basis carefully, then ask a question, that is, from this test basis, what should I test? And the answers for that question, what, will become your test conditions. So you have to identify them in a very systematic manner and put them in one place called a test condition documentation. After having done that, you have to think now, how will I test each of these test conditions and put them into a document called test cases. That is our fourth step, designing and prioritizing test cases. So how will you go about designing? For every test condition that you have identified during the previous step, now you think about what kind of inputs will I give and test this condition. And that thinking process will involve what we call test cases, and you have to prioritize them as test cases. Then the fifth step is identify necessary test data. So whenever you have a test case, there will be some inputs you will give to the software, and those are called test inputs, that is embedded inside your test case. But not only those inputs, to conduct a test execution of testing based on your test cases, the software must be filled with some pre-existing test data. And that is what you have to think about it, identifying necessary test data. Then also next step you have to do is that where will you test? What kind of test environments are needed for performing these tests? That is what is the sixth step, and we call it as designing the test environment. So the sixth point is designing necessary test environment. So what is test environment? The place where we do testing, the hardware and software on which this software under test will be tested. So at the time of analysis and design phase, we must think and design about our test environment. So that is our sixth step. And after having done that, the seventh step is determining the item pass-fail criteria. So each of this test item that we are testing, on what conditions can I say that the item is passed and go to the next stage, or based on what conditions the item is considered as failed and it has to be improved. So that criteria also will be thought about at the time of your test analysis and design. And the eighth activity that you have to do at the time of test analysis design is creating a bidirectional traceability. We'll talk about it later on, but what is this? Whenever you are testing, you have a set of requirements, and those requirements are subdivided, let's say, into some scenarios or use cases. And for each of these use cases, I have identified test conditions. For those test conditions, I have created test cases. So now we have to create a traceability. So which test case is connected to which test condition, from that test condition which use case, and this use case is related to which requirement. Creating this traceability is very important to understand, especially what we call the requirements coverage, and that is very important exit criteria for us. So at the analysis and design phase, after having completed test conditions and test cases, you will create a bidirectional traceability matrix. In the next lesson, we will talk about how to create what we call requirements traceability matrix. So again, recapping on our analysis and design activities as a test analyst or as a test engineer, what you will do, you will identify all the documents and artifacts that you are going to use to determine the requirements of a component. That's what we call test basis. So you will spend some time, collect and identify all the information that you are going to use for your testing. Then also you will analyze testability of those test bases. So as I told you, the testability is ease with which we can create or think about test cases based on this documentation. Then once you have that, you will identify test conditions. Test conditions is a list of items that will come to you as you ask a question, what will I test based on this test basis? And that will form part of your designing test cases. And then another important item that you have to understand is test environment. Identify or develop a test environment including hardware and software. And then also you have to talk about test data. Determine the data that is needed to execute the test. As I told you, there is a test data that is related to your test case, but that is not enough. In order to execute your test cases, you have to fill the database of your software with a lot of pre-existing data. For example, if you are testing a banking software, so if you are testing a transaction for an account holder, before you do that, you have to have a lot of accounts, a lot of transactions already done, some pre-existing data about customers and account types and accounts must be there, then only you can do testing easily. So you have to think about test data. And then all your test cases you develop and prioritize them, and test case will have an input value, expected value, and also you have to think about the execution preconditions, and writing all these test cases is an important activity around analysis and design phase. So let us check your knowledge on these activities so far we learned. So the question is, which of these tasks would you expect to be performed during test analysis and design phase of the fundamental test process? A. Defining test objectives. B. Reviewing the test basis. C. Creating test suites from test procedures. Analyzing lessons learned for process improvement. What is the answer? So, designing or defining test objectives. When will it happen? It will happen at the time of test planning. Reviewing the test basis, it's an activity that is performed during test analysis and design. So, that is the right answer. So, let us check your understanding furthermore between the tasks or activities related to planning and control and also analysis and design. So, on the left side column, I have a set of tasks. What you have to tell me is that this task is related to planning and control or it is related to analysis and design. So, the first task, identifying the high level testing objectives. These tasks belong to which activity? Planning and control or analysis and design? Which one? Yes, you are right, it is related to planning and control. The second task, design and prioritize test cases. This task related to planning and control or analysis and design? Yes, you are right, it is analysis and design. Determining the exit criteria for testing. When will it be done? It will be done at the time of planning and control. Evaluate the testability of the test basis. When is it done? It is done at analysis and design phase. Determine the test approach. Is it a planning and control task or is it an analysis and design task? What is that? It is a planning and control related task. Track, monitor and document progress. This task is related to planning and control and specifically it is a control task. Identify necessary test data. So, when will you do it? At the time of analysis and design. The last task, identify the test basis. Again, this is at test analysis and design time. Hope you have understood planning and control activity as well as analysis and design activity. So, learn and have fun.